Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on viewing the latest feature releases for Sage Intacct. My name is Ali Pakalnis, and I will help facilitate our webinar today. Before we get started, here are a few tips on using the Zoom platform so you can engage with our presenters and have the best experience possible. Next slide. You should see a Zoom toolbar with icons for Ask a Question and Raise Your Hand. Please use the Ask a Question feature to submit a question or comment. If you need any assistance, click on the Raise Your Hand button and I will connect with you to help. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation and we will do our best to answer them all. If we didn't answer your question, we will follow up with you personally after the presentation. Within 72 hours of the webinar, you will receive a link to download the slide deck and recorded presentation. Next slide. Today's webinar does qualify for CPE credits. To receive your credits, you must actively respond to 3 out of the 5 polling questions and stay on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any difficulty answering the polling questions, please email elevatelearn@armaninolllp.com with questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters, Jeremy Anderson and Jessica Wirtz.
Hi, Jeremy Anderson. I'm a senior consultant here at Armanino. I'm on the managed services team. I'm excited to share these updates with you.
And I'm Jessica Wirtz. I'm also a senior consultant on the managed services team, and we do have a lot of great updates to cover today. We also have Sam Narlock and Saher Ahmed today that will be helping answer questions that you submit.
The learning objectives for today's webinar are to identify the new release features of your solution, to demonstrate the new user experience and navigation to ease adoption, and to manage the latest release of the solution to maximize its potential. So here's the agenda of the topics that we will be covering today. This brings us to our first polling question, which is employee banking information always visible in Audit Trail? I'll give you a moment to answer that. So the correct answer is no. So we'll be covering this in this next section. So in company administration, the first enhancement is around the email delivery and insights. So previously this was an early adopter program, but now it is widely available. This supports DKIM authentication, which is the leading industry standard for email security. After authenticating, you have the ability to send email to your primary domain as well as subdomains, and you have full view of email delivery history, such as the status of delivery or recipient status. The next feature is around the global transaction security. So what this does, it allows you to enable entity or top-level specific security around editing, deleting, or reclassifying transactions. This is set at either the top level, or if you want to have it individually set, you can go to the entity and set these settings respectively. And there are new permissions available that allow for drafting transactions and reports. Another feature is around the custom number formatting. So what this does is, for example, if you have a company that is not USD, you can set the primary formatting for these numbers at either the top level or a company level or by user preferences. So what this does is it allows you to set either the thousands separator as well as the decimal. So you could set it to either comma, underscore, period, and this can be set by user or across the board. Some other updates are around the sandbox. So previously, only customers who had new sandboxes had the capability, but now this is widely available. With this functionality, all customers and partners can create, refresh, and manage their sandboxes directly within their environment. So this would allow you to go in there. It is permission based, but you can go into your environment and refresh as needed. Some other features are an added language. So they've recently added French, and this is available at the company and user language option. And this will affect the Sage user interface, the help center, the community, and release notes. And then adding on to the banking employee information. So previously, when you're looking at an audit trail, you would see all updates made revolving around the employee banking information. Now you have the option to turn this feature off so that when you review an audit trail, you will no longer see employees' banking information. Something to note is that this is not retrospective, so that all changes prior to this adjustment, they will still show in the audit trail. This brings me to accounts receivable, which Jessica will be covering.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. The first update in accounts receivable is a really exciting one. I know it's something that a lot of clients have been waiting for a long time, and that is we have single payments for multiple customers that is widely available. So we touched on this last release as it was an early adopter program. And since it's widely available now, you won't need to join an early adopter program or anything to be able to use this feature. And so the use cases for this is if you are maybe a school or an insurance company, if you're receiving a single check that needs to be applied to numerous different customers and their respective invoices, this is going to allow you to do that while also keeping the check entered as a single payment that's going to match your bank account. Another important thing to note here is you are able to apply a payment to a parent and child customer invoices. And again, using that school example, this is going to be really important. A lot of my school clients have the parents set up as a parent customer, and then their children that are, in various different levels of the school as the children to that customer. It really helps with reporting. And so we're actually going to flip over into Intacct to show you how to enable this today. And so Jeremy, if I can have you go to the applications dropdown, and we're going to go to accounts receivable. And then under setup, we can go to configuration. It's important to note that you may not see the configuration option. This is permissions based. So if you're not able to see it, you'll need to reach out to your administrator for your Intacct account. And if you scroll down, there will be a section for enable functionality. And the last option there is the new one that we have, and that is enable single payments for multiple customers. So if you check that box and click save in the top right. And now if we go back to the accounts receivable dropdown and click all, and make sure that you're clicking receive payments new. And this is important because you see that there's receive a payment and receive payments new. And so the new one is going to mirror all of the new interface within Intacct, and eventually the old one will go away. And so now under apply payment to, you can see that there's a dropdown for one customer invoices, parent and child customer invoices, or multiple customers invoices. And with that, we can go back to the presentation. And if we want to go to the next slide, okay. The next update is the Bank Transaction Assistant. And this one, again, it was an early adopter program in the last release. And so the Bank Transaction Assistant, along the lines of applying those payments to customers, what this is allowing you to do is when your bank transactions are syncing in daily from the bank into Intacct, you're able to post a payment. And so when you're in the bank transaction list and you're posting that payment, it's going to streamline the process for you, because not only are you applying the payment to the customer invoice, which is reducing your AR, you're also going to have that transaction automatically matched on the bank side. because it knows exactly which payment it should be matched to. So this is going to be a huge time saver. If we want to go to the next slide, a few additional updates in accounts receivable. The first one being the customer aging report. So there are some additional filters that are available when you're running your customer aging report. You're going to be able to run by customer ranges. You can also filter by a customer group if you have groups set up. And additionally, you'll have the option to include child customers. And so previously, you would have had to select individual vendors or run it for all the vendors and pull it into Excel and filter from there. So this is going to help make sure that you're pulling the data and information that you need. And next is the printed deposit. So whenever you're printing your deposits from Intacct, there are just some additional fields that are going to print on that form. There's no additional setup needed on your behalf. And finally, for accounts receivable is continuous spaces. And this is going to be really important for any import files that you have, but you'll no longer be able to input numerous spaces. You'll only be able to include one space in between words. And this is going to affect both customer and vendor fields for the ID name and then print as company name and the contact name. This is going to help when you're importing things because sometimes the pesky additional spaces will kick out your import. So it's really going to help in that manner. If we want to go to the next slide, we will launch our second polling question of the day. And that is, what filters are available on vendor aging reports? It's a bit of a trick question, so we'll give you a minute. Alrighty, it looks like almost everyone got it right, and that is all of the above. So we're going to be able to filter on all of these options. And with that, we'll go ahead and cover accounts payable. Alrighty, so the AP automation usage report, some of you or most of you may remember at the beginning of this year, Intacct released the AP automation feature. And at the time, it wasn't billable. So it wasn't something that was going to be an additional fee if you were using the service until October 1st. So on October 1st, it did become something that Intacct was going to charge for the service or for the module. And with that, they've released the AP automation usage report so that you can have an understanding of how often you're using the AP automation. And so we're actually going to jump back into our demo company to show you how to run this report. And so if you want to go back to the dropdown again and go into company, and we're going to go to the admin tab. And then in the first column, all the way at the bottom, there is the subscription usage under usage metrics. And so in this demo company, we've only used the AP automation feature a few times since this was available. So you can see here that it'll give you the monthly summary. So this will go back 3 months, starting with November when this feature was released. And it will give you the total number of transactions created in that month. And then you can see in transaction history, you're able to filter to the date range that you want to see of how many transactions were created in that month. And it's also important to note in the detail of the transactions that the first 2 transactions there were actually deleted. So we have the date deleted and deleted by. And so this is important because even if the transaction was subsequently deleted, it is considered still being used in AP automation. So you will be able to see anything that was also deleted. Great. If we want to go back to the PowerPoint, we can go to the next slide. And so this may sound a little bit familiar on the vendor aging report as it was on the customer aging report. So these additional filters, we will be able to filter the report by a vendor range. And then when you're filtering by the vendor range, you have the option to include the children vendors. And then also the ability to filter by a vendor group if you have vendor groups set up. If we want to go to the next slide, awesome. So some additional enhancements in the accounts payable module is in the bill pay screen. And I think this one's going to be really popular for a lot of people. I know I have several clients that have asked for this in the past. Is you're able to see the preferred payment method for the vendor on the bill pay screen. So as you're paying bills, you can see how that vendor wants to be paid. Previously, the workaround was to create an advanced filter for each preferred payment method type. And then you would have to select that filter, and then you could pay those vendors in that manner. And it's also important to note on this that you'll have to go into the vendor card and set the preferred payment method in order for this to populate. And next is recalling a submitted bill. So previously, if you had submitted a bill and then maybe you needed to change the department or anything about that bill needed to change, but it was submitted, you would have had to wait for the approver to deny the bill to send it back to you to edit. And with this release, you're able to recall the bill, and the approver will be notified that the bill was recalled so that they're not searching for the bill to approve, but it will move it back to a draft state for you to update and then resubmit back to the approver. And last release we had vendor approvals that came out. And one of the things with the vendor approvals were if you were updating vendors through a CSV import, it would not reroute them through the approval process. And so with this release, we're correcting that. And so if you update vendors through a CSV import, it will send it back through the approval process. And finally, in AP is an additional required field. And so the field is the vendor an individual? And it's a yes or no. And so this one is going to be super important. We're going to talk about 1099s a little bit later today. But this field can be very helpful whenever you're preparing throughout the year for 1099 time. Because if it's not an individual, you likely won't need to submit a 1099 for them. If it is, they're going to be the ones that you want to really review to make sure that you have all of the necessary information. And so it is important to note here that if nothing has been selected, it will default to no for all of the existing vendors. So it may be a good exercise to review your vendor list and move any that are an individual to a yes. If we want to go to the next slide. And so next is purchasing. And in purchasing is an early adopter program for automated transaction matching. And so this one I think is going to be a very popular early adopter program. So if you are interested, please reach out to your client manager. And this program is going to help with if you have AP automation on the AP module, but you're also using the purchasing module for your POs, this feature will allow the AI to match the invoice to the PO so that you don't have to manually convert from a PO to a vendor invoice. I'm sorry. It's also important here to note that if it isn't going to have a PO and it should just go straight through the AP bill process, you can opt out and only use this feature for the AP bill automation, which is how it's operated before now. And if we want to go to the next slide, we will cover cash management. The first update in cash management is alpha sequencing for reconciliation. And this, I think, is going to be incredibly helpful for a lot of people. So the alpha sequencing and how it's going to help your reconciliation is it will allow you to, if you set up the numbering system or lettering system, it will assign a sequence to both your Intacct transaction and the bank transaction. So you will know that transaction A on the Intacct side is matched to transaction B on the bank side, and you don't have to hunt and peck to see which transactions are matched to each other. It does require a little bit of initial setup, so you can determine if the match sequencing should apply to only automated transactions or are automatically matched transactions or manually matched transactions. But you can also determine if you want it to match to partially matched transactions. So it does require some setup as far as how you want the match sequencing to work, but then it can be very helpful when you're doing your reconciliations. If we want to go ahead to the next slide. Okay, we have still in the early adopter program is the robust bank transaction import. And this one, hopefully it will be released soon because I think it's going to be a huge time saver for everyone, especially everyone that they aren't able to link their bank account to Intacct for the direct transaction import. So if you're importing your transactions currently, you have to import them by bank account. And this is going to allow you to A, import an Excel file and not have to save it as a CSV, but B, you'll be able to import all of the bank transactions at one time. You won't have to do it by bank account. Additionally, in cash management, there is a new permission, and that will allow, I think we had a question come in on being able to turn on the single payments for multiple customers, and it is going to be this permission under cash management that you'll need added to your user. And the final update in cash management is the generally available premium bank feeds via Access Pay. So if your bank doesn't link to Intacct and doesn't allow you to have the direct sync between the two, instead of importing the bank files, you may be able to use Access Pay. So you'll have to create an account with Access Pay, but it will provide that fully automated statement retrieval service. It's going to be important to note here that Access Pay will charge a fee for the service. So just make sure that you look at the Access Pay website and see if it's going to be the best answer for you. If we go to the next slide, I will pass it to Jeremy for construction.
Thanks, Jessica. So the new enhancement for construction is the project contract billing tab. So this does require the project costing and billing and construction subscription. But what it does is it provides a read-only view of project contract billing details. So this combines multiple applications and subledgers to bring invoicing details into your project record. So, and if you look in the image, you can see a number of transactions as well as where they're coming from. And another neat enhancement is that they added a new data source in the ICRW reporting module, as well as printed document templates. So this is a great way to pull all of this information into a report that can be customized to fit your needs, as well as pull this information into printed document templates. Another neat enhancement, and this came from an idea in the community, is compliance tracking. So let's say you're working with vendors and subcontractors, and you need to make sure that everyone has their insurance or permits in place before you make payment to them. Well, with this functionality is you can set up compliance definitions and types that will allow you and notify you if you try to make a payment to one of these vendors who has not fulfilled these requirements. You can directly email and print lien waivers using customized templates, and all of this can be monitored directly within your Sage environment. Another enhancement is around the Sage field operations. So this allows for a flat rate pricing, so you can bring and offer individual items representing both parts and labor for a particular service at a consistent price. It also integrates with Fortis payment so that employees have the functionality to accept credit card payments using any mobile device. Some other areas of enhancement are the ability to add quotes directly within the mobile application. You can view parts and miscellaneous items even when you're offline, and you can track employees' location for punch actions. And if you're interested in this subscription, definitely let your client manager know. And some other updates around Sage field operations are the ability to track and pull information both in field and while in office. And this is available in the Apple App Store as well as the Google Play Store. The next enhancement is around the new Sage Construction Management application. So this is a new application that merges with mobile devices, and it allows you to manage and maintain projects from one platform on any device. As you can see in the image, you have the ability to manage and maintain your projects from either in office or out in the field. You can track all information in one location. You can input and manage and maintain your contacts and leads. You can simplify the estimation process. You can view specifications around your projects, and you have the ability to share all this information with external team members. So if you have a subcontractor that isn't a Sage user and you want to share some information with them, you have that functionality to do so. But this is an added subscription, but please contact your client manager if you'd like to learn more. And this brings us to our third polling question. Does consolidations allow for partial entity ownership? I'll give you a moment to answer that. It looks like the majority of you answered that correctly, which is yes, and we'll be covering this in this next section. So in consolidations, previously the advanced ownership consolidation was an early adopter program, but now it is widely available for everyone to subscribe to. So something to note, I think is a very neat feature, is that if you are currently subscribed to either domestic and or global consolidations, you don't need to subscribe to a whole new package. This is considered an upgrade from your current subscription. And what this does is it allows for improved accuracy around entities with partial ownership. It allows you to save time and reduce errors without having to create percentage or customized reporting to pull in these numbers. It's all done automatically with this consolidation. And you can manage ownership by period and reporting book, and you can generate at each level and parent entity. And all this is effortlessly synced with standard reports or financial report writer. So this brings me to the contract section. So in contracts, we now have expenses listed as an option to select, just like we can with the contract lines. So within contracts, we now have direct access to view a list of all your contract expenses to allow for easy access to maintain and manage these expenses. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what this looks like in the demo. So in contracts, I'm at entity level, but to get there, we would go to contracts, and under all, we have expense lines. And a neat enhancement is that they have enabled the new advanced configuration view. So we can easily drill into a record. So we can see all the details for that record. And we also have the split view where we can see other expense lines. So we can easily navigate to another one or search to find other transactions. Let me go back to the slides. Some other areas that we can easily configure the expense lines view to meet our needs. You can add other columns, you can minimize or expand, you can reorder, all within that view. And this brings me to nonprofit, which Jessica will be covering.
Thank you. In nonprofit, we are able to change the billable labels. And this is going to be a great change because, as you may know, if you use the projects module, or what we sometimes or most of the time change it to the grants module, you know that it's listed as a billable expense. And in nonprofits, that most of the time doesn't make sense. It's not a billable expense. It's whether or not the expense is qualified within the agreement that you have with your funding source. And so with this update, we can change the verbiage in the module. So in that grants module or the projects module that are one and the same, we just change the way that it presents, but we can change anywhere that it says a billable expense or billable item, it will change to say qualified. And I think that this is really going to make it much more accurate for all of our nonprofit clients that are using the grants module. And it is an easy setup. So it's just a checkbox, as you can see here. So under your projects configuration or grants configuration, you would just select between the billable label field, or billable field label, excuse me, and you can switch it to grant from the project or grant, and it shows you there in parentheses that it would be billable or qualified expense. So it's a relatively easy change to make a large part of the system more geared towards what you need. If we go to the next slide, the next update in nonprofit is the Sage Intacct Ministry Intelligence. So this is a new feature. It is an additional subscription that's available. So if you're interested, contact your client manager. And what this Ministry Intelligence allows for is it allows for Intacct to integrate with your church management system, which is going to help you. You would have access to this dashboard and a lot of other insights within Intacct as Intacct is integrating seamlessly with your church management system. So again, if this is something that you're interested in, please reach out to your client manager and we can provide more information. If we go to the next slide. So next, right along the same lines with the nonprofit is Sage Intacct Mateo. And we typically get a lot of questions on what Sage Intacct Mateo is, and it's a very specific module for diocesan entities, and it's for those entities to manage their savings and loans program. So within Mateo, the latest update is endowment accounting that will allow for your bank statements and other transaction pages to be listed as either restricted or available balances. So you can easily identify what those balances are within Sage Intacct Mateo. We go to the next slide, we'll launch our fourth polling question, and that is, can general ledger account numbers be changed? Yes or no?
So the answer is actually yes, and we'll be covering this in the general ledger. So a new feature that has come out is the ability to adjust both the account number and the length of your GL accounts. A use case for this would be if you're merging with a company or another company is merging with you, and you want to standardize your chart of accounts to meet your needs. This can be done by editing your account number as well as the sub-account numbers. This is permission-based and it can be set by user or role. And something to note is that it does not affect the financial data as there is all GL accounts and statistical accounts have a record number that is hard-coded that cannot be adjusted. But I do want to emphasize that this will cause any custom reporting to break, so that are using either specific GL accounts or ranges, as well as any kind of smart events or smart rules that you have put in place. So I do want to emphasize that if you want to make this change, I recommend speaking with a certified Sage Intacct implementation consultant before making any changes. Some other enhancements are around making adjustments in a locked period. So this is a configuration that needs to be enabled, but what it does is it allows for users to prevent feature postings in the GL. So for example, in the image to the right, we have a maximum number of unlocked fiscal years marked to all. And what this means is you can post to all fiscal years that are open. Now, if I were to change this number to 2 or 3, what that means is at any given point, you may only post to 2 or 3 open periods. So if I have my books closed through today, I can only post 2 years in the future. Whereas if I have books open for a year prior, I can post from the prior 1 year in the future. Another way to accomplish this, if you simply want to prevent future postings, is you can use a smart rule, and that can be configured to any amount of days in the future. This brings me to inventory. So previously, the fulfillment and the commit quantities was an early adopter program, but it is now widely available. To take a sales order and make a pick ticket and fulfillment transaction definition, and then add them to the workflow. Now Intacct has built them directly into the workflow and will automatically move inventory totals from quantity reserved to quantity picked to quantity packed and then quantity fulfilled. So this is a great way to expedite the process of converting transactions and also monitoring and maintaining your inventory at the same time. So I think this is a great enhancement. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to your client manager. The next section is around lease accounting. Previously, lease accounting did not have its own out-of-the-box quick start category or account groups. With this release, we now have the option to have new categories and account groups added to support compliance with lease accounting. New organizations can simply select the quick start template right away, whereas existing organizations will need to update existing account groups to include the new categories and groups on the financials. And something to note is that these new account groups can be downloaded directly from your account groups library. And this brings us to our fifth and final polling question, which Jessica will be covering.
What is the threshold for minimum 1099s for e-filing? Is it 250, 50, 10, or 1,000? Alrighty, it looks like answers were all over the board. So the correct answer is 10. And we will be covering that in the tax section that is next. And awesome. Okay, so for those of you that guessed 250, you would have been right at this time last year. So the IRS actually reduced the minimum threshold for e-filing from 250 down to 10. So ultimately, they're kind of trying to get to where everyone has to e-file their 1099. And so the workflow that you see here is really a way to help you kind of understand, do you need to e-file? You can still e-file if you are filing under 10, and you have options to do so. And so if you do need to e-file, there are several options that you have in order to do so. One of them is to e-file completely on your own. And while you're more than welcome to do that, I don't know if anyone's really going to go with that option. But we would like to make sure that everyone knows that Armanino does have a 1099 team. And since everyone here is a Sage Intacct client, Sage Intacct does partner with Tax Bandit. And so with the partnership with Tax Bandit, they will e-file for you based on your 1099 report in Intacct. So you'll review everything in Intacct, send it over to Tax Bandits, and they will submit on your behalf. So if we want to go to the next slide, we're just going to cover a couple of items that can be done right now, because I think it's really important to spend some time right now thinking about 1099s. You know, hopefully you'll get a little bit of downtime at the end of the year here before everything picks up, because 1099s are going to be due at the end of January. So mid-November through the end of December is a great time to think about those things before the end of January. So if you're interested in using Tax Bandits, some of the items that you can go ahead and get taken care of right now is going to be confirming that your Intacct environment has the Sage Cloud Services feature turned on. This is a part of your core subscription. So whenever if you're not currently subscribed to it, if you turn that toggle on, it is going to give you a pop-up just because you're in the subscription screen saying, hey, this may cause some additional fees to your subscription. But Sage Cloud Services is one of those that it's not going to. And then once you have Sage Cloud Services turned on in your accounts payable configuration, you will need to enable 1099 e-filing by Tax Bandit. Both of these items are going to require admin access in your environment. So if you don't have that access, maybe start those conversations with the admin for your environment. And once both of those things are turned on, you'll be able to create a Tax Bandits account on the Tax Bandits website, and you'll be able to link your Intacct to Tax Bandits, and that's how the information is going to flow seamlessly from Intacct into Tax Bandits to be able to e-file. And additionally, an item that you can do right now is reviewing your 1099 information. Even though the year hasn't closed out, you're still going to be paying vendors throughout the end of the year. But you can just make sure, any vendors that have been paid over the threshold to this point, that you have their W-9, so you have all of their appropriate information to send them a 1099. All of those kinds of things can be reviewed at this point before you get ready to file. And if we want to go to the next slide, we'll be covering projects.
Thanks, Jessica. So in projects, they have now announced and released the project estimates tab. So what this does is it allows you to set estimates to plan for your revenue and expenses, and you can set multiple expense lines per project and create multiple entries per estimate line. And something to know, this did come from the community, an idea. So I do recommend, if you have an idea for a future enhancement that you would like to see, I strongly recommend that you submit these ideas, because Intacct is keeping an eye on when they have enough traction. They do evaluate whether or not it would be something to include in a future release. But I'm going to go ahead and demo this for you. So where we're going to go is we're going to open the dropdown. And if we go to projects or grants, depending on your environment, we're going to go to the Alt tab, and we're going to select projects or grants. Now this may be, depending on your environment, you may see projects or jobs or grants. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this top one. Now on the far right, we now see this Estimates tab. So I already have one that was added, but what we're going to do is we're going to add or go through the process of adding a new estimate. So we have the option to select the project that is assigned to. Now you'll see that it pulls in the begin and end date of. Something to note is that the estimate date does need to be within the project or grant. And the neat thing is we can easily integrate it with one of your current geo budgets. Something else we also do is we can select how we want it to distribute that estimate based on the period of that project. And here, this is where we can indicate the dimensions and specifications for that estimate. Another neat enhancement is project intelligence. So what this does is it allows users to have insight over employee time entries. It's comprehensive performance measurement for both employee and teams to reveal those who are meeting their goals, meeting potential, those who are handling too much. So just to help see where everyone is currently at in their workflow. You have data regarding revenue contribution, productivity rates, write-offs to provide more complete assessment of employee effectiveness beyond simply tracking billable hours. It provides essential metrics to help assist project managers in overall status of their project and assess the profitability of your service team by conducting a thorough examination of the projects, clients, and employees responsible for generating revenue. If you're interested in learning more, you can contact your client manager. Another enhancement around project intelligence is the dashboard project intelligence. So this provides a number of metrics based on utilization by the project, or you can change it to look at the reporting year or drill into a specific project. But this is a neat way to get an overall performance of your projects. This brings me to reporting. So enhancement that they added to financial reports is the ability to drill down into stored financial reports. So when we store a financial report, what it does is it takes a snapshot of that report at that point in time. It allows you to download or view, and it keeps the data. Something to note is that if you drill into this data, it will give you the current data. So if there is a transaction that was booked after you stored the report, you will see that change. Another enhancement that I'm very excited about is around the ICRW reporting package. So for those of you who are not aware of what ICRW is, this ICRW allows for users to build powerful reports from a wide range of reporting areas. It combines BI with transaction analysis. And I like to think of ICRW as a version of Excel where you can create pivot tables and get pretty creative with your reporting. Something that was added is the ICRW learning journey. So what this does is it allows you to there's various levels. So you can begin your journey and you can continue if you're already familiar, and then it allows you to advance and become proficient in ICRW reporting. And as mentioned previously, they've added a couple of new reporting areas. One being the project contract billing detail, which pulls aggregate data from invoices related to the contract line as well as payroll report tax setup, which enables users to categorize and set up information for payroll taxes, and this extends to construction payroll reporting. I'm going to go ahead and show you where you can find the learning journey for ICRW. So this can be found if we go to the Help and Support tab. We can select the Help Center. And if we type in Learning Journey, this will bring us to the ICRW Learning Journey. And if we click into here, we have a number of topics where we can pick up. And this brings me to user experience, which Jessica will be covering.
Awesome. If we want to go to the next slide, I know we've talked about the list enhancements, the last several releases. Intacct does continue to add these to additional screens. So the new ones this time are the customer, sandboxes, and then contract expense details. So if you're on these screens, you'll have an option in the top right to go into the list beta interface. So we just want to make sure that everyone knows to click into that beta interface whenever you're in any of these list screens and play around with it. Just see if there's anything that you really like or anything that you very strongly dislike. There's also going to be an option when you're in the beta interface to share feedback to Intacct. And again, eventually all of the list screens will look like the new list view. So that's why the feedback is so important. Make sure that we're sharing feedback with Intacct so that they can make sure to get this right before it's the only option that we all have. And if we want to go to the next slide, this is one that you've likely noticed, even just from Friday when the release came out. When you're in Intacct, all of the screens that you see are going to be the Intacct branded colors, which are the green that you see, and then also any of the links. So if you're in your application screen or you're in your reports list, any of those, a link is going to be underlined so that you know for sure that it is a link that you can click. If we want to go to the next slide. And this one, the interface label changes. Typically there are a few every release, and this time there were lots of them. Most of them surrounding construction and consolidations. So we did in the PowerPoint here, we included a link to the entire list. It would have taken up too many slides to try to cover all of them. So if you do want to look at that full list, you will have access to that of all of the descriptions that did change. And if we want to go forward, that brings us to web services. The web services development portal is always available. Do you want to go ahead and click into the next one? Sorry. Okay, so the development portal, again, this is a live link that you can click and read all of the ins and outs of the changes that Jeremy and I have covered today. Some of the highlights being in accounts payable, accounts receivable, company and administration, and consolidations. But anytime there's a change to the user interface, there's going to be changes in the developers portal. So that's where in this blog, you can stay up to date on all of those things. And if we want to go to the next slide, we really want to highlight here the Armanino-led Intacct classes. Again, just stressing the importance of 1099s. I know there are several 1099 classes that are coming up that you can, use to help prepare you for those 1099s. And also the advanced classes that came out recently. This link will get you to a list of all of those classes. If we want to go to the next slide, and if you do have any questions, please reach out to Jeremy or I. We're happy to answer those questions for you. It looked like there were lots of questions in the Q&A. So that's fantastic. Hopefully we covered a lot of ground today. So hopefully if there's any questions, we can help everyone out. And with that, we hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.